world, they usually think about dinosaurs. T-Rex, Spinosaurus, Triceratops. Big, powerful, and always stealing the spotlight. But today, we're giving the dinosaurs a day off. Because long before those giant reptiles ever appeared, Earth belonged to something else. Something older. Something more patient. And, surprisingly, something even more important. Plants. Now, I know what you're thinking. Plants? Really? After all, they don't run, they don't hunt, they don't roar, they just stand there all day. But here's the funny part. These quiet green organisms completely changed the planet. Without them, there would be no forests, no animals living on land, and of course, no dinosaurs. So today, we're going to travel back nearly 500 million years to meet the first green pioneers that dared to leave the water and conquer the land. Along the way, we'll discover strange ancient forests, giant prehistoric plants unlike anything alive today. How plants transformed a barren world into the thriving planet we know now. So grab your time machine, sit back, relax, and let's journey into the forgotten history of prehistoric plants. Let's begin. If we could travel back in time about 500 million years, many of us would probably be disappointed. There were no dinosaurs, no birds, no mammals. In fact, there wasn't even a single tree. The landscape was covered with endless stretches of rock, sand, and mud. Far in the distance stood barren mountains under an empty sky. There was no green anywhere, no forests, no grasslands, no leaves rustling in the wind, nothing that looked remotely like the world we know today. To put it simply, the land looked like a completely different planet. If you plan to go camping there, well, good luck, because the only thing you would be looking at all day was rocks. Lots and lots of rocks. Meanwhile, the oceans were a completely different story. Beneath the waves, life was thriving. Strange creatures swam through ancient seas. Primitive fish were beginning to appear. Countless prehistoric animals were slowly taking over the oceans. The seas were full of activity. But there was one problem. Almost all life was trapped in the water. It wasn't because these organisms didn't want to explore the land. The problem was that land was a terrifying place. There was no water to protect their bodies. The sun beat down directly on the surface. Temperatures changed dramatically between day and night. Any creature that ventured onto land risked drying out very quickly. To be honest, land at that time was like playing a survival game on the hardest difficulty setting, and most living things wanted no part of it. But somewhere along ancient coastlines, a small group of green organisms began to appear. These were the distant ancestors of modern plants. At first, they looked nothing like the trees we know today. Flowers, no fruits, no giant crowns of leaves. They were tiny, simple organisms struggling to survive in an unfamiliar environment. Yet history has shown us something interesting. Sometimes the smallest pioneers create the biggest changes. Little by little, these early plants adapted. They learned how to retain water. They learned how to anchor themselves to the ground. They learned how to survive under the harsh sunlight. This was not a process that happened over a few years, or even a few thousand years. It took millions of years. Generation after generation, small improvements accumulated. Tiny evolutionary changes slowly transformed these pioneers. And then something remarkable began to happen. Patches of green started appearing on the land. At first, they were small and scattered near the coast, but gradually they spread farther and farther inland. For the first time in Earth's history, the continents began turning green. At the time, no one could have realized how important this was. But the planet was entering a new era, a revolution unlike any other. There were no battles, no roaring predators, no dramatic chases. Instead, there were only small green organisms quietly doing their work. And those silent pioneers would eventually transform the entire atmosphere. They absorbed carbon dioxide. They released oxygen, day after day, year after year, million years after million years. Slowly, Earth's atmosphere began to change. Nobody knew it then, but these primitive plants were laying the foundation for nearly all future life on land. In other words, long before dinosaurs became the stars of prehistory, Long before mammals appeared, long before humans existed, plants had already begun writing the first chapter of the story. And this was only the beginning, because in the next chapter, these tiny green pioneers would achieve something extraordinary, something the world had never seen before. They would create the first forests on Earth. Chapter 2, the first forests. So far, our tiny green pioneers had achieved something remarkable. They had survived on land, but survival was only the first step. Now they wanted something else, more sunlight. And just like that, one of the oldest competitions in Earth's history began. The race toward the sky. At first, plants stayed close to the ground. Most were only a few centimeters tall, but sunlight was a valuable resource. The taller a plant grew, the more sunlight it could capture. And the more sunlight it captured, the more energy it had to grow. It was a simple advantage, yet it changed everything. Over millions of years, natural selection rewarded height. Plants that grew slightly taller often performed better than their shorter neighbors. Generation after generation, the winners passed their traits to their offspring. Slowly, the world began to change. The age of giant plants was beginning. To support their increasing size, plants evolved new structures. Some developed stronger stems. Others created specialized tissues capable of transporting water from the roots to the top of the plant. These innovations may sound boring today, but at the time, they were revolutionary technology. Imagine trying to build a skyscraper without steel, concrete, or machines. That was essentially the challenge plants faced. Yet somehow, evolution found a solution. Little by little, plants became taller and taller and taller. The sky was no longer out of reach. Around 385 million years ago, Earth witnessed something it had never seen before. The first true forests. For the first time, large groups of tall plants covered entire landscapes. The once barren continents began transforming into green worlds. From above, the planet itself was changing color. These early forests looked very different from modern forests. There were no oak trees, no pine trees, no flowering plants. Instead, strange prehistoric species dominated the landscape. Many of them would seem alien to us today. Among the most successful was a tree-like plant known as Archaeopteris. Despite its strange name, Archaeopteris was a true pioneer. It possessed a woody trunk, large branches, and an extensive root system. Some individuals reached heights of more than 20 meters. For its time, that was enormous. If you could stand beneath one of these giants, you would feel very small. Their roots dug deep into the ground. Their branches spread across the sky. Their leaves absorbed huge amounts of sunlight. These were no longer simple plants. They were ecosystem engineers. The arrival of forests changed the planet in ways nobody could have imagined. Roots stabilized the soil. Rainwater flowed differently across the land. New habitats appeared. Entire communities of organisms began living among the vegetation. Life on land was becoming increasingly complex. And there was another consequence. The forests were removing enormous amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. At the same time, they continued producing oxygen. Slowly but surely, Earth's atmosphere was being reshaped by plants. The world was becoming more suitable for larger and more active animals. In a way, plants were preparing the stage for future stars. Long before dinosaurs walked the Earth, forests were already hard at work. They were building habitats, producing oxygen, and transforming a hostile world into a living paradise. But the story was far from over, because the forests of the future would become even stranger, even larger, and far more mysterious. Soon, Earth would enter an age of vast swamp forests, giant insects, and oxygen-rich skies. An age unlike anything we see today. Welcome to the Carboniferous period, one of the strangest chapters in the history of life, and perhaps the closest thing Earth has ever had to an alien world. About 359 million years ago, Earth entered a remarkable chapter of its history. Scientists call it the Carboniferous period. But if you could travel there in person, you might call it something else. The age of endless swamps. Almost everywhere, vast wetlands stretched across the landscape. Dense forests covered enormous areas of the planet. The air felt different. The world looked different. Even the smell would have been unfamiliar. Towering plants rose from dark, muddy ground. Giant ferns spread their leaves in every direction. Massive club mosses and horsetails formed forests unlike anything alive today. This was not the Earth we know. This was a lost world. H. Some of these plants reached heights of more than 30 meters. That is roughly the height of a 10-story building. Yet many of them were not true trees. They belonged to ancient groups that have either disappeared or shrunk dramatically over time. The dominant plants of the Carboniferous would seem almost alien to modern eyes. One reason these forests became so successful was the climate. Large portions of the planet were warm and humid. Rain fell frequently. Water was abundant. For plants, it was paradise. As forests expanded, they covered more and more land. Green life was spreading across the continents at an incredible pace. But these forests were doing more than simply growing. They were changing the atmosphere itself. Through photosynthesis, enormous amounts of oxygen were released into the air. Year after year, century after century, million year after million year. The concentration of oxygen continued to rise. But these forests were doing more than simply growing. They were changing the atmosphere itself. Through photosynthesis, enormous amounts of oxygen were released into the air. Year after year, century after century, million year after million year, the concentration of oxygen continued to rise. Today, Earth's atmosphere contains about 21% oxygen. During parts of the Carboniferous period, oxygen levels may have exceeded 30%. That difference might not sound dramatic, but it had extraordinary consequences. The entire planet became a very different place. One of the most surprising results involved insects. Because oxygen was so abundant, some species were able to grow far larger than their modern relatives. Imagine seeing a dragonfly with a wingspan approaching 70 centimeters. That is roughly the size of a hawk. And yes, creatures like that really existed. One famous example was Meganura. This giant insect ruled the skies of the Carboniferous world. With enormous wings and impressive speed, it was among the largest flying insects ever known. If one flew past your face, you would probably never forget the experience. The ground was just as strange. Huge millipede-like creatures crawled through the forests. Some reached lengths of more than 2 meters. Imagine walking through a swamp and discovering an arthropod longer than a grown adult. The Carboniferous was full of surprises. Despite their size, these creatures were not monsters. They were simply products of a unique environment. High oxygen levels allowed bodies to grow larger than what is common today. The forests and the atmosphere worked together to create a world unlike any other. Meanwhile, something important was happening beneath the trees. Leaves fell, branches broke, entire plants died and collapsed into the swamps. Normally, dead plants decompose and return their carbon to the atmosphere. But the Carboniferous forests had a secret. Those buried plants eventually became coal. The name Carboniferous actually means coal-bearing. Many of the coal deposits used by humans today began as these prehistoric swamp forests. In a sense, ancient plants stored sunlight underground for future generations. It was a gift from a world long gone. For millions of years, the Carboniferous forests dominated the planet. They shaped the atmosphere, supported giant insects, created vast ecosystems, and left behind resources that humans would one day discover and use. Their influence stretched far beyond their own time. But no age lasts forever.
The stage is set
the
for the
climate would
rise of
eventually
the
begin to
ancient
change.
cycads.
Some forests would disappear. New environments would emerge. And with those changes came new opportunities for evolution.
The world enters
a different
the
kind of
age
plant
of
was preparing to
cycads.
rise. The world of giant swamp forests was approaching its end. Yet the story of plants was far from over. Because the next chapter would introduce a revolutionary innovation. Seeds. A simple invention that would help plants conquer the planet more effectively than ever before. For hundreds of millions of years, plants had relied on a difficult strategy for reproduction. Most needed water to reproduce successfully. This worked well in swamps and wetlands, but it created a serious limitation. If plants wanted to conquer drier regions, they needed a better solution. Evolution was about to provide one. That solution was the seed. It may look simple today, but in the history of life, it was one of the greatest inventions ever created. A seed was more than just a package. It protected a young plant, stored nutrients, and allowed the next generation to survive difficult conditions. Suddenly, plants had new opportunities. Unlike earlier plants, seed-producing species did not need constant access to water for reproduction. They could spread into places their ancestors could never reach. Dry hills, open plains, and regions with changing seasons. The world was getting larger for plants, and plants were getting better at conquering it. As seed plants spread across the continents, ecosystems began changing once again. New forests appeared, new habitats emerged, and the green blanket covering Earth became even more diverse. The age of innovation had arrived. Plants were no longer simply surviving. They were thriving. Among the most successful groups were the gymnosperms. These ancient seed plants would eventually dominate much of the planet. Their descendants still exist today. Many familiar conifers, including pine trees, belong to this ancient lineage. But hundreds of millions of years ago, they were pioneers. Gymnosperms possessed several advantages. Their seeds could survive harsh conditions. Their leaves reduced water loss, and many were better adapted to dry environments than older plant groups. As climates changed, these qualities became incredibly valuable. Natural selection rewarded their success. Slowly, the balance of power among plants began to shift. The giant swamp forests that once dominated Earth were fading. In their place rose forests of seed-bearing plants. The world was entering a new era, one that would eventually belong to reptiles, dinosaurs, and other land animals. The relationship between plants and animals became increasingly important. Plants provided food, shelter, and stable habitats. Without realizing it, these forests were preparing the stage for future ecosystems. Every branch, leaf, and seed helped shape the world to come. Millions of years passed. Continents drifted, climates changed, new species evolved, and throughout it all, plants continued adapting. They were among the greatest survivors in Earth's history, quietly responding to every challenge the planet presented. Soon, another major chapter was about to begin. The age of dinosaurs was approaching, and when those giant reptiles finally appeared, they would enter a world already transformed by plants. A world of forests, seeds, and thriving ecosystems. The story of dinosaurs could not exist without the story of plants first. The plants that fed the dinosaurs. Around 230 million years ago, dinosaurs began appearing on Earth. At first, they were small and relatively unimportant, but over time, they would become the dominant animals on land. Yet even the mightiest dinosaurs depended on something far older than themselves: plants. By the time dinosaurs arrived, the world was already covered by vast forests. These forests looked very different from modern ones. There were no flowering plants yet, no roses, no sunflowers, no grass-covered fields. Instead, ancient seed plants ruled the landscape. Conifers were among the most important. Their tall trunks and evergreen leaves allowed them to thrive across huge regions. Many resembled modern pine trees. Others looked unlike anything alive today. Together, they formed immense forests, stretching across entire continents. Another common group was the cycads. At first glance, they looked somewhat like palm trees, but they belonged to a much older lineage. Their thick trunks and crown of stiff leaves made them a familiar sight throughout the dinosaur age. For millions of years, cycads flourished. Beneath these larger plants grew vast carpets of ferns. Some species covered entire forest floors. Others grew along rivers and wetlands. Although ferns had existed long before dinosaurs, they remained incredibly successful. They became a key part of prehistoric ecosystems. For plant-eating dinosaurs, this world was a buffet without end. Everywhere they looked, there was vegetation. Leaves, shoots, branches, seeds. Entire forests served as giant food supplies. Without plants, herbivorous dinosaurs could never have reached their enormous sizes. Consider the giant sauropods. Animals like Apatosaurus and Diplodocus grew longer than buses. Some weigh tens of tons. Maintaining bodies that large required staggering amounts of food. Day after day, they consumed vast quantities of vegetation. The forest fed the giants. Many sauropods evolved long necks to reach leaves high above the ground. This allowed them to feed without constantly moving. They could simply stand in one place and harvest enormous amounts of plant material. It was an efficient strategy, and it worked extremely well. Meanwhile, other herbivores specialized in lower vegetation. Some fed on ferns, others preferred cycads. Different species occupied different ecological roles. Just as modern animals have favorite foods, dinosaurs likely had preferences as well. The relationship between plants and dinosaurs was not one-sided. As dinosaurs fed, they influenced plant communities. Seeds were spread, vegetation was trimmed, habitats were altered. Plants shaped dinosaurs, and dinosaurs helped shape the plant world around them. Predatory dinosaurs also depended on plants, even if indirectly. Carnivores hunted herbivores. Herbivores depended on vegetation. Without healthy forests, entire food chains would collapse. At the base of nearly every ecosystem stood the same quiet foundation: plants. For more than 100 million years, this partnership continued. Dinosaurs evolved into countless forms. Some became giants, others became swift hunters. But through all those changes, plants remained essential. They were the fuel that powered the age of dinosaurs. Then, during the Cretaceous period, something extraordinary happened. A completely new kind of plant appeared. At first, it seemed insignificant, small, unassuming, easy to overlook. Yet it would eventually transform ecosystems across the planet. These newcomers were flowering plants. Today, we call them angiosperms. Unlike older plant groups, they reproduced using flowers and fruits. Their arrival marked one of the most important evolutionary events in Earth's history. A botanical revolution was beginning. Flowers attracted insects. Fruits encouraged animals to spread seeds. Reproduction became faster and more efficient. Many flowering plants grew rapidly and adapted to changing environments. Soon, they began expanding across the world. Some dinosaurs may have witnessed the first great spread of flowering plants. The landscapes around them were changing. New colors appeared. New food sources emerged. The ancient world was becoming more diverse than ever before. Few organisms could have predicted the impact these plants would have. Over time, flowering plants would dominate much of the Earth's vegetation. Forests would change. Food webs would change. Entire ecosystems would be reshaped. Yet before flowering plants could fully take over, another event was approaching. An event that would forever change the history of life. The age of dinosaurs was nearing its end. And with it, many ancient ecosystems would disappear. But plants would survive. They had survived droughts, climate shifts, mass extinctions, and countless environmental challenges. The next chapter is not about how plants conquered the world. It is about how they survived when the world nearly ended. Chapter 6: The Day the Sky Fell. For more than 160 million years, dinosaurs ruled the Earth. They survived changing climates, shifting continents, volcanic eruptions, and countless environmental challenges. It seemed as though their reign would never end. But then, one ordinary day, everything changed. About 66 million years ago, a giant asteroid was racing through space. For millions of years, it traveled silently through the solar system. No dinosaur could see it coming. No animal could prepare for what was about to happen. The collision would become one of the most important events in Earth's history. The asteroid struck near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The impact released an unimaginable amount of energy. The ground shook violently. Massive earthquakes spread across the planet. Gigantic waves raced through the oceans. The world entered a nightmare. Rock and dust were blasted high into the atmosphere. Some debris was thrown beyond the edge of space. As fragments fell back to Earth, The sky itself appeared to burn. Across vast regions, wildfires erupted. Forests that had stood for millions of years were suddenly consumed by flames. But the worst was still to come. Dust and smoke filled the atmosphere. Sunlight struggled to reach the surface. Days became darker. Weeks became darker. Months became darker. The world was entering a period scientists sometimes call an impact winter. Plants depend on sunlight. Without enough light, photosynthesis begins to fail. Growth slows. Leaves die. Entire ecosystems start collapsing. The disaster that began in the sky was now spreading through every food chain on Earth. Herbivorous dinosaurs suffered first. As vegetation disappeared, food became scarce. Many animals could no longer find enough to eat. Their populations declined. And when herbivores struggled, carnivores soon faced the same problem. The entire ecosystem was unraveling. Over time, nearly all non-avian dinosaurs vanished. The rulers of the prehistoric world were gone. After more than 160 million years of dominance, their age had come to an end. It was one of the greatest mass extinctions in Earth's history. Yet something remarkable happened. Not all plants disappeared. Many species survived. Some seeds remained buried underground. Others endured in protected environments. While countless organisms vanished, plants once again demonstrated their incredible resilience. The extinction of the dinosaurs created opportunities for other groups. Mammals, once small and relatively insignificant, began expanding into newly available habitats. Over millions of years, they diversified into countless forms. The age of mammals had arrived. As years passed, sunlight gradually returned. Plants expanded once more. Forests reappeared. Animals evolved into new forms. Life refused to surrender. Despite one of the worst disasters the planet had ever experienced, recovery had begun. In fact, some scientists believe that ferns were among the first plants to recover. After the catastrophe, vast areas may have been covered by fern communities. It was almost as if nature had pressed a reset button. The old world was gone. A new world was beginning. Through all these changes, plants remained at the heart of the story. They fed ecosystems, produced oxygen, and rebuilt damaged environments. Just as they had done many times before, they became the foundation of recovery. If dinosaurs had never disappeared, the world might look very different today. Yet regardless of which animals ruled the land, one fact remained unchanged. Plants continued shaping the planet, quietly, patiently, and with extraordinary persistence. The age of dinosaurs was over, but the story of plants was far from finished. Their greatest success was still ahead, because soon, flowering plants would spread across the globe and transform the modern world we know today of flowers. For hundreds of millions of years, forests were dominated by ferns, cycads, and conifers. They were successful, they were widespread, and they seemed impossible to replace. But around 140 million years ago, a new group of plants appeared. At first, they seemed small and unimportant. History would prove otherwise. These newcomers were flowering plants. Today, they are everywhere, from giant trees to tiny wildflowers, from tropical rainforests to city gardens. But their rise was one of the greatest evolutionary success stories in Earth's history. The age of flowers had begun. At first, flowering plants were relatively rare. Ancient forests were still dominated by older plant groups. If you had visited Earth during the early Cretaceous period, you might have walked for days without seeing many flowers at all. They were only beginning their journey. So what made flowering plants different? The answer lies in reproduction. Flowers allowed plants to attract animals that could help carry pollen from one plant to another. Instead of relying entirely on wind, they gained living partners, and that changed everything. Insects became some of their most important allies. As flowers evolved new shapes, colors, and scents, insects responded. Bees, beetles, flies, and other pollinators visited flowers in search of food. Without realizing it, they helped plants reproduce. This partnership benefited both sides. Plants received reliable pollination. Insects received nectar and other rewards. Over millions of years, flowers and pollinators influenced each other's evolution. It became one of nature's most successful collaborations. Flowering plants also developed another powerful innovation: fruits. Instead of simply dropping seeds onto the ground, many plants enclosed them inside nutritious structures. Animals ate the fruits, then carried the seeds far away. The plants gained free transportation. This strategy allowed flowering plants to spread rapidly. Forests changed. Landscapes changed. Entire ecosystems began transforming. In many regions, flowering plants started replacing older plant groups. A botanical revolution was underway. Even dinosaurs may have witnessed this transformation. As flowering plants expanded, new food sources appeared. New habitats emerged. The world became more colorful and diverse. The final chapters of the dinosaur age unfolded alongside the rise of flowers. After the extinction of the dinosaurs, flowering plants continued spreading. Many ecosystems recovered under their influence. They adapted quickly to changing environments. Again and again, they proved remarkably resilient. The world increasingly belonged to them. Today, more than 90% of all plant species are flowering plants. The forests, fields, and gardens around us are largely their creation. They dominate the modern landscape. Yet their ancestors began as small pioneers in a world ruled by dinosaurs. Every apple, mango, rose, sunflower, and oak tree tells part of this story. Their existence is connected to an evolutionary journey that began millions of years ago. A journey filled with competition, innovation, and survival. One of the greatest success stories in natural history. But while flowering plants conquered the world, not every ancient plant disappeared. Some survivors endured, quietly living through climate shifts, mass extinctions, and changing continents. They would become living windows into Earth's distant past. A few ancient lineages still exist today. Some have changed very little over tens of millions of years. They survived when countless others vanished. They are often called living fossils, and their stories are just as fascinating as those of the dinosaurs. In the next chapter, we will meet these remarkable survivors, plants whose ancestors shared the world with dinosaurs, plants that still stand among us today, silent witnesses to hundreds of millions of years of Earth's history. Living fossils. When people hear the phrase living fossil, they often imagine dinosaurs. But some of the most remarkable survivors on Earth are actually plants.
I've never seen anything like it. Are you getting a match?
Have endured for millions of
we
years.
need to document everything.
They survived
the
asteroid
world once
impacts,
dominated by giant
ages,
ferns and misty
climate
swamps
change,
slowly
and
gave
the
way
rise
to
and
the
fall
sunlit
of
oak
entire
and maple
ecosystems.
forests of the modern era.
Their ancestors shared the planet with creatures that disappeared long ago. Some grew in forests where dinosaurs once walked. Others survived mass extinctions that wiped out countless species. Today, they remain as living connections to Earth's distant past. Time travelers rooted in the soil. One of the most famous examples is the ginkgo tree. Its ancestors appeared more than 200 million years ago. That means ginkgo trees were already growing when dinosaurs ruled the Earth. Few living organisms can claim such an ancient heritage. The leaves of ginkgo are instantly recognizable. Unlike most trees, they have a unique fan-shaped design. Fossils from millions of years ago look remarkably similar to modern ginkgo leaves. In some cases,
this orchid is vital to our ecosystem. By protecting it, we ensure the health of the entire forest.
Ginkgo might disappear
And these young,
forever.
careful, these are precious.
Wild
Make sure the
populations
count is
became
accurate.
extremely
Got
rare.
it.
Yet the
34
species
so
survived.
far.
Today, ginkgo trees grow in cities, parks, and gardens around the world. A survivor from another age standing among modern buildings. Another ancient group is the cycads. These unusual plants were once among the most common species on Earth. During parts of the dinosaur age, cycads covered vast areas of the landscape. Many herbivorous dinosaurs likely fed on them. At first glance, cycads resemble palm trees, but they belong to a completely different lineage. Their ancestry stretches deep into prehistoric time. Long before flowering plants became dominant, cycads were already thriving across the globe. Although their numbers have declined dramatically, cycads still exist today. Some species can live for centuries. Their thick trunks and tough leaves reveal adaptations that help them survive countless environmental changes. They are relics of a forgotten world. Ferns are another extraordinary example. Unlike flowering plants, ferns reproduce using spores rather than seeds. This ancient strategy has existed for hundreds of millions of years.
Demonstrates remarkable resilience in our changing world.
It remains surprisingly effective. Walk through a modern forest, and you may see ferns covering the ground. At first, they seem ordinary, but their ancestors witnessed events almost beyond imagination. They survived mass extinctions, continental drift, and dramatic climate shifts. These plants remind us that survival is not always about being the biggest or the strongest. Sometimes success comes from resilience, the ability to adapt, to endure, and to persist through changing worlds. When we look at living fossils,
look at that
we are
giant
seeing more
fern.
than ancient organisms.
It's glowing.
We are
I've never
seeing
seen
survivors.
anything like it.
Each leaf and branch carries a story stretching back through immense spans of time. A story written long before humans existed. In a sense, these plants are natural museums. Their bodies preserve clues about ancient ecosystems. Their survival helps scientists understand how life responded to past challenges, and perhaps how it may respond to future ones. The world has changed countless times since these plants first appeared. Dinosaurs came and went. Mammals rose to dominance. Human civilization emerged. Yet some ancient plants remained, quiet witnesses to the passage of time. Their journey is a reminder of something extraordinary. Plants are often overlooked, yet they are among the greatest survivors of Earth's history, and their influence on our planet continues to this day. But perhaps their greatest legacy is still waiting to be revealed. Not all ancient plants became extinct. Some endured through unimaginable stretches of time. While entire groups vanished, a few survivors continued their journey into the modern world. Their existence is one of the most remarkable stories in natural history. Take the ginkgo tree as an example. Its ancestors witnessed the rise of dinosaurs. They survived the breakup of continents. They survived mass extinctions. And somehow, they survived long enough to share the world with humans. Imagine standing beneath a ginkgo tree today. The leaves above you resemble leaves that shaded prehistoric landscapes millions of years ago. In a sense, you are looking at a living piece of Earth's ancient history, a survivor from another age. Scientists often compare fossilized ginkgo leaves with modern ones. The similarities are astonishing. Across vast spans of time, the design changed very little. It is one of evolution's most enduring success stories. Cycads tell a similar story. These strange plants flourished during the age of dinosaurs. In some regions, they dominated entire landscapes. For millions of years, they were among the most recognizable plants on Earth. Many herbivorous dinosaurs likely encountered cycads every day. The plants formed part of the environment around them. They stood beside rivers, covered open areas, and helped shape prehistoric ecosystems. Although modern cycads are less common, they remain important reminders of the past. Looking at one today is like opening a small window into the Mesozoic era, a glimpse into a world long gone. Ferns may be even more impressive. Their ancestors appeared hundreds of millions of years ago. They survived multiple extinction events. Again and again, they proved their resilience. When other species disappeared, ferns often returned. After the asteroid impact that ended the age of dinosaurs, ferns were among the first plants to recover. They spread across devastated landscapes, helping rebuild ecosystems. Their success demonstrated the incredible adaptability of plant life. Together, ginkgo trees, cycads, and ferns reveal an important lesson. Survival is not always about strength. It is about adaptation, persistence, and the ability to endure change. Their story has lasted hundreds of millions of years, and it is still being written today. The legacy of prehistoric plants. More than 500 million years ago, the land was barren. There were no forests, no flowers, no grasslands. Only rock, wind, and silence. Yet from that empty world, plants began one of the most extraordinary journeys in Earth's history. The first plants were small and fragile. They lacked deep roots, they lacked wood, they lacked flowers. But they possessed something even more important, the ability to adapt. And that ability changed the planet forever. Over millions of years, plants transformed barren landscapes into living ecosystems. Roots broke apart rock. Soil began to form. Water cycles changed. The atmosphere changed. The earth itself was being reshaped. The first forests appeared. Towering trees spread across ancient continents. Their leaves captured sunlight. Their roots stabilized the ground. Their presence altered the climate of the entire planet. The world was becoming greener. As forests expanded, oxygen levels increased, animals diversified, new ecosystems emerged. The foundation for complex life was being built. Without plants, the story of animals would have been very different. When dinosaurs appeared, they entered a world already prepared for them. Plants fed them, sheltered them, and supported entire food chains. The age of dinosaurs was built upon a foundation of green life. Even the largest creatures ever to walk the earth depended on plants. The giant sauropods, the horned herbivores, the duck-billed dinosaurs, all relied on ancient vegetation for survival. Plants were the true engine of prehistoric ecosystems. Then came one of the darkest moments in Earth's history. A giant asteroid struck the planet. Entire ecosystems collapsed. The dinosaurs disappeared, but many plants endured. Once again, life found a way forward. From the ashes of extinction, new forests emerged. Flowering plants spread across the globe. New animals evolved alongside them. The planet entered another chapter of its story, and plants remained at the center of it all. Today, flowering plants dominate much of the Earth's surface. Forests cover vast regions. Grasslands feed countless species. And every breath we take depends on the oxygen produced by plants. Their influence surrounds us every day. The food we eat comes directly or indirectly from plants. The wood used to build homes comes from plants. Many medicines originated from plants. Even fossil fuels trace their origins back to ancient forests that existed hundreds of millions of years ago. It is easy to overlook them. Plants do not roar like dinosaurs. They do not run across the landscape. They do not dominate movie screens. Yet their achievements may be greater than those of any animal. Plants transformed the atmosphere, created soil, fed ecosystems, survived mass extinctions, and made complex life possible. Few groups of organisms have changed the Earth so completely. When we walk through a forest today, we are witnessing the result of hundreds of millions of years of evolution. Every tree carries a story. Every leaf is part of an ancient legacy. A legacy that stretches back to the earliest days of life on land. When people think of prehistory, they often think of dinosaurs. But long before the giants arrived, and long after they disappeared, plants were here, quietly shaping the world, patiently building the foundations of life. Their story is not one of speed or power. It is a story of persistence, adaptation, survival, and the incredible ability to thrive through constant change. A lesson written across 500 million years. The forests around us are more than collections of trees. They are living monuments, connections to an ancient past, reminders of the countless generations of plants that came before, and symbols of life's resilience. The next time you see a leaf, a flower, or a towering tree, remember this. Its story did not begin yesterday, or even thousands of years ago. Its roots reach deep into Earth's distant past. For more than 500 million years, plants have endured. They witnessed the rise and fall of worlds, the coming and going of countless species, and the transformation of an entire planet. Their journey is one of the greatest stories ever told. And that story is still continuing today. The plants around us are the descendants of ancient pioneers, survivors of extinction, architects of ecosystems, and silent builders of the world we call home. The age of prehistoric plants may be over, but their legacy lives on in every green thing that grows. Haha! And that's the end of our journey today. Together, we've traveled through more than 500 million years of Earth's history. From the very first plants that stepped onto land, to the age of dinosaurs, and all the way to the modern world we live in today. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to like and subscribe to support the channel. By the way, what would you like me to cover next? Dinosaurs? Prehistoric animals? Ancient plants? Or perhaps another mystery from Earth's distant past? Leave your ideas in the comments below. I always enjoy reading your comments and discovering your amazing suggestions. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this documentary. If you have ideas for future videos, please leave a comment below. Your support helps this channel grow. Take care, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye!